a doctoral student at UCLA. He's researching growth mindset strategies and developing faculty training to improve student success. He emphasizes collaborative learning, contextualized writing, and self-discovery. And welcome to Mary Jo and Miguel, and I hope that you guys have a great
Well, thank you so much for that introduction. We're great to see you twice now. We're glad to see you 3 times, yeah. It's good to see all of you. She took away what we normally say, so did a much better job of it. What we're really going to share is basically, since we're in the same doctoral program that we started last fall, a year-long project that we worked on is our action research project, focused on testing to see if growth mindset interventions in basic skills classes have an impact on student learning. So we're going to start off with Miguel and the story to share.
So, I think there's an image for this too.
Oh, I do. So I don't have my clicker today. So
Yeah. So I don't know how many of you guys know about the Illuma Wallet. It's a very wonderful toy, but I'm not here to sell it to you. I'm here to tell you a story about growth mindset and the Illuma Wallet and my family. So I'm going to pass this around. So the Illuma Wallet is very important to my family because my son, Jack, has severe learning disability. He's very good orally, but has visual processing issues. And as a child, it was not really clear he could actually learn to read. We weren't sure. And he would try and read, and he'd get really frustrated, and he would say, I can't read, Dad, I can't. And I knew as long as he said he could, he was not going to be able to. It might be true that he possibly physically could, but we didn't know, and I was struggling, so I started looking into brain research information because of my son. And so we worked on it. It was really hard. I get a little emotional during this story, but we'll work through it. So, so one day, the son comes to me, and I'm laying in bed. It's probably 5:36 in the morning. My son's standing right on my face. He goes, Dad, Dad, Dad. I'm like, what? Fire or something, right? It's like, we have to buy the Illuma Wallet. And I'm like, okay. No one's in fire. Okay, so tell me about the Illuma Wallet. And he sits there and tells me the entire commercial that he has memorized of the Illuma Wallet, which is good. But the exciting part was he had written down on a piece of paper the phone number for the Illuma Wallet, which he doesn't do that. Like that's like, so we bought like 20. So my family now has a lot of Illuma Wallets. Everyone we know got one for Christmas. But the point was that because he stopped saying he couldn't do it, and he started believing that he could, then he was able to. So that's my growth mindset, like personal narrative that really makes a big difference. He just this year got mainstreamed, and so he's still getting special classes, but he's out of mainstream classes, and he's doing a really great job. He's now 11. So that's my Illuma Wallet story, my personal connection, and why I got interested in growth mindset in general, or in particular in sort of brain research as a way to help students learn in particular. So that's my story about Jack and why I think growth mindset is such a powerful tool.
So I was the lucky one to follow that great story by transitioning over to sharing with you what we did with our students. So we basically are going to show you, we developed 6 sessions, 6 20-minute sessions to help students cultivate a growth mindset. We're going to show you, actually walk you through all of them in one. And so what we usually talk to students about, we started out by telling them, well, we go to school to learn, but we often don't talk about how we're learning. And so these sessions we're going to talk about what happens in the brain when you're learning. And so we're going to start with this video. I hope this sound will work.
What happens inside your brain when you are thinking? How do we learn? New technology has created great progress in brain research. These new tools give us a window into the brain. The outer covering of the brain is called the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is more evolved in humans than in any other animal, and it is most associated with higher order thinking. This is where most of the brain's learning happens. The cortex is made up of 2 halves or hemispheres. The 2 hemispheres are joined together by a large bundle of nerves. One of the keys to understanding how the brain learns is to recognize that nerve cells are highly interconnected. Any given nerve cell may make thousands of connections. The orange in this image is the cerebral cortex. With new technology, we can look deep into the cells of the cerebral cortex. Inside the folds of the cortex, nerve cells make countless connections like telephone wires. As we zoom in further, we can see individual nerve cells. These cells appear black, with branches reaching from one cell to another. These branches are called dendrites. The nerve cells connect to one another through branches or dendrites. The space where 2 dendrites meet is called a synapse. The synapse is the communication link between individual nerve cells. An amazing pattern of interconnectivity. Each dendrite branch can create thousands of synapses. These connections between nerve cells are one key to understanding the brain, including how memories are stored and how we learn. The nerve cells use chemicals called neurotransmitters to pass information from one dendrite to another. And when you learn, your brain makes new connections. In fact, when you learn, the brain grows new connections by growing new dendrites.
So Miguel's going to take us through a closer look at neurons and dendrites.
So, as brain research is made possible, we're really starting to understand the way the brain works, and sharing this with students is very powerful. I was just telling Mary Jo, I just graded 2 sets of separate in-class essays, and one of the students was in my class while we were practicing these, so she got to see some of them, and she just wrote in a paper about things to change in education. That was the topic, and she had a specific proposal, and she talked about growth mindset being something that we should start teaching people at a younger age. But another student who didn't know that I had taught faculty on my campus to do this, so no idea it was connected to me, wrote a year later about how she thought the most important thing she learned in college was about dendrites and neuroplasticity. So people ask me, what's the longevity? Well, it's very anecdotal, but just like in the last 2 days, I read 2 different students. One of them had no idea they were sucking up to me by talking about them. I cared about. So this is an image of the neuroplasticity, or in this case, neural decay, because this is a large area, right? So these are the neurons and these are the dendrites, and you can see where there's a synaptic firing, those are lit up. And so there's actually making a jump where the electrochemical pulse jumps across that synaptic gap and carries the information. This happens inside your brain. But this is an area of neural decay because it's not being used as much. So if we look at the next slide, which was representative of neuroplasticity, you can see it's a much healthier looking image. There's much stronger dendrite growth, because that's actually the part that changes. When you learn, you create this new dendrite growth. This piece grows. The neuron's there, and the dendrite grows, making more synaptic connections. One way to think about this is that when you, your brain is like a field of grass. When it's a brand new field, there's no marks on it, but if you walk back across the grass, you might leave a path. The first time you walk there, there's no path, right? But if people walk back and forth, they take that shortcut diagonally across, it develops a path. That's what happens. You create a new neural pathway by repetition, which is why repetition works, right? How many of you have studied a foreign language before, right? And then you stop studying, and you don't remember it quite as well as you used to. But when you go back the second time and start learning, you're not starting from scratch, right? You're not starting at the beginning. You still have those pathways. They didn't disappear, right? That's the process of neuroplasticity. You grew neural pathways, and they can decay and become less obvious, but they do not disappear. And that's one of the things we developed later in a session. We're not going to work with you, but we show students some research that shows that they do not entirely lose things, so when you learn things, it stays with you. It's a matter of relearning how to access it. So that's the concept of neuroplasticity.
And so we also showed students what this would look like in the brain. So this is actually, this video is of MIT researchers have captured a growing dendrite, this kind of red thing here with the branches growing out. It's a growing dendrite happening in the brain. So we show this to students to show them that this is real and that what this looks like physiologically. So if students have never heard, or if you've never heard of the word neuroplasticity, this is happening in your brain right now.
Is that real time? Is that how long?
You know, I got that question and I could not, I went back to the original site and I'm not sure how quickly it's elapsed. I don't know.
So it's not
if
real time.
I don't think it's real time, yes. But I
But
haven't
they
figured
didn't
out
label
the
it for
elapsed.
us to tell us the actual time lapse factor.
Yeah. So we would give all this information to students, but
And
we're
you don't know
actually,
the activity either?
what's that?
We don't
Oh,
know
what
the
they were doing. You know, I don't know what the
activity.
stimulus was. Yeah,
No,
it didn't
it's
say.
not a well-labeled MIT video.
It's not. And it's also really hard to find again. It's funny. So now we're going to do an activity in the class to build this neural connection, to simulate it. So everyone who has, is it blue or yellow? Blue handout is their very first handout.
We're late.
No, I've got some packets.
Who has blue as their first? It says learning cert.
Orange and yellow.
So some people won't have it.
Some
You're
people have
okay, you're
yellow, some
yellow.
people have blue.
So you might have, so let me just jump real quick. So as a way to do this in class quickly, I don't have to pick the teams. I pass them out this way so that if you're yellow, you're going to be on the yellow team. If you're blue, you're on the blue team. And if you're white, you're just on the audience team. You get to watch. And so that way we can do this quickly because we're developing this so that we can pass it on to people and we'll explain the process. But I just trained my teachers and I didn't go in the classroom at all, so I had to give them material they could just like pick up and use for their session. So this is how we would divide the teams up. So the blue team, right? I'm going to pass it. Okay. The blue team would come on up, and we're going to show you an activity. So if you have a blue front page, you don't even bring anything with you. Just come on up. You have the blue handout first. Oh. Okay. So blue team, you're spread yourself between these cups here. And you're going to be a model for us for neuroplasticity. So they're going to stand shoulder to shoulder, where I'm in the way. So there's a red cup here. And then you have a red cup there. So they're neurons. Raise your arms. These are your dendrites. Please pass out a spoon to each person. That's a neurotransmitter that you're going to use to pass the synaptic gap between their hands. So they each have a neurotransmitter they're going to use. And if you could pick up that first cotton ball with your hand.
My hand?
Just one cotton ball, one hand, and then put in a spoon. Now the rest of you have to pass them using only your neurotransmitters. You can't use your hands for the rest of the time, so you pass it all the way across. And they're going to keep passing it. And so this is what happens. When you see something, you're walking down the school pathway here, and you see a rock or something fly at the corner of your eye, you have to decide to duck. But there's a process that's kind of interesting because it has to come from your eye to your occipital lobe, which strange is in the back of your head. So you have to decide fast enough to duck or not. So this has to be really fast. It has to move from one. Oh.
No.
So you're going to deposit this information in your occipital lobe. Now, they close their eyes apparently because once they saw the first thing, they stopped. But really, they should keep their eyes open because there's a rock coming at them after all. So you should keep things coming. Each new piece of cotton information is going to be passed on. You guys are going to keep going. Very good. And they're going to keep the next ones keep going because they don't stop. New information is always passing through. Now we're building a neural pathway. At first they were not here assembled. Now their neurons are connected. They're making a quick pathway. They're making transitions and they're passing information. And so that's how a neural pathway is developed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, as they would continue, that would explain how the process works. So now here's where the second part of this turns into a game. Because now,
this wasn't the game.
now the yellow team, when I say but not yet, is going to get up and they're going to do the same thing. But we're going to move them over here so you can see both groups at the same time. So, you're going to, when I say, the yellow team is going to, like the Avengers, assemble up here. And you're going to stand shoulder to shoulder, pass out your neurotransmitter spoons, and then pass information from your eyeball to your occipital lobe so you can process it and decide you should duck before the rock hits you. Does the yellow team have any questions? Okay, so if you guys can stop.
We're going to reset you.
Yeah, you'll count these.
You're going to
You have to
reset.
start over. I like to think of hard work as practice getting you ready for what really is being measured. So, when I say, you guys can start, and you get to start as soon as I say, but the yellow team will have to come up here, assemble, pass out their spoons, and start. If everyone's ready, begin.
Here are your transmitters.
And do watch out, there's a cord there. I don't want to check. Yep. Remember, only the first person who picks it up can use their hands. Gotta let her get in her neural pathway.
Okay, we have
So
more.
go down.
We'll take 6. You can be on the audience team.
All right, so the yellow team and the blue team are both going. If you drop one, that's when you lose your train of thought. You don't get to pick those up. So you don't get to pick that one up. So you get to do a new one. It's okay, I'll slow you down. Learning can be a challenge. It's always a little bit different for everybody.
The cotton ball is my strategy.
You like that?
Yeah.
So they're actually talking about strategy, which is always good, right? When people can learn from each other and learn good ways to learn new material, that's a helpful thing. We'd like to see in our classrooms where people help each other with ways to learn, not just what to learn. Third, somebody over here mentioned that they're getting smoother at it. That's what happens with practice, right? Things that are initially challenging become easier after you do them repeatedly. Valuable lesson for students who struggle in a certain subject or all of them.
What confidence.
You get more confident, right? 49, you're nervous. Like, you're like totally casual, man. Like, just pass it, maybe. But isn't it actually easier when you're not stressed about it? Like, the harder you work, like, you made it so much harder. Right? So let's say 10 seconds.
Maybe we start getting overconfident.
You stop doing your homework. We're not talking about 5, 4, and stop. So if it's in the pathway, you got to put it back, and then we'll count how many are in it.
Almost.
Alright, so if you can count those for me.
Yeah, so count how many pieces of information, you were successfully able to
Can I use my hands this time?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Please.
You know,
Now
I'm
you
a
have
programmer also. I'm
Trying to go for the full emptying the cup. It's like very zen.
1819.
Okay,
And
19.
how many do you guys have?
12.
12. All right, let's give it. So, we already did some of this, which may or may not happen in your classroom, or if you were to use this activity where they were sort of making observations, so I was trying to call them out so everyone could hear them, sort of lessons that might be learned. But are there other things that people observed in the process that might be useful?
That, when you very first started, the first one you sent regular, but then I think it was you, Carmen, devised the strategy,
Yeah.
and then
Oh, I know.
everybody took up the strategy.
It was like a this type of thing.
Yeah.
As a clamp or
Yeah.
something.
But when we started, I hated that strategy, so I refused to do it.
I was trying to get them to use it, and
I
then
did.
Anita
I like it.
overrode
You could have told
You made it.
Very high gap.
So, but you picked it up
the brain
from
in yours.
observing, right? And I think you were talking about that as something that came up in your when you tried this in your class, that their learning happens just by
Oh,
observing,
yeah,
right?
the group that was just observing it first didn't get to practice. They were like pumped that they were gonna absolutely defeat.
It's often pretty close, right? Which
Yeah.
it shouldn't be, because they should have several done before they even
Right.
walk up here, right?
Right.
But what I like to point out to people is, I use foreign language as my example, so what that says about me. I struggle with foreign languages, and there's sometimes someone sitting next to me who's practically fluent, and I just feel like it's not fair. They're just a language person or whatever, but often it's just they're further along, like they've been studying this language before, which is what you could see here, right? When they first did it, they weren't particularly great at it, but they had done it before I got there. So someone sitting next to you in class who's not struggling isn't necessarily smarter than you. They're at a different part of the process than you. If you can get people, including myself, to appreciate that, that's a powerful lesson. I'm not good at this. I'm new to it. And then with process, I can get better. And if you can get that student recognition, that's a very powerful thing, right? It alleviates some of the stress of the innate quality that some people tend to fit, which is really what a fixed mindset is about. I'm not a blank kind of person. It's a completely fixed mindset. Not that I'm not yet, but if you can think of it in terms of a process instead of a current result, that's a better way to do it. So this game can kind of help with that. Anyone have anything else? So one thing we like to do before we let them sit down, though, is we want to review. So what do they represent in the neuroplasticity? What part of that? Well, they're the neuron, right? And so what are their arms? Those are the dendrites that reach out. And then what's the spoon? The spoon is the neurotransmitter that jumps the spoon, right? They use the spoon to jump over the synaptic gap. So they're the neurotransmitter. So that's just a recap of that. And I think so let's give them a round of applause. Thank you.
Yeah, the cotton balls are pieces of information.
Yeah.
So in your handouts or your packet, the very first one you have is yellow, blue, or white. This is learning survey. This is the way that we started to collect the data from students systematically. So every session we collected data. This was something we did before we started. We had them fill out this first sheet that was kind of like some demographic information. And on the back of it, we asked them to respond to these statements to basically see where they fall on the mindset spectrum. And then the green sheet is the handout that the students get to kind of recap the activity and the vocabulary we talked about. Is there anything in here?
Well, so when we just went over that with the physical
Yeah.
people up here, it's also here, so you can use the handout as a way to review, and we let the students leave with the green handout, so this is something they can take with them. And I like the visual at the bottom. So you see the first version of the neuron with a few dendrites where there's not very much, but then the second version where it's much more dendrite growth, that's actual neuroplasticity. So students say, like, how can my brain grow? My skull is only so big. And like, see, well, it doesn't take up more space, there's just more density. Like you actually grew, the same number of neurons have grown more. In one of the sessions we get to, it might be 2 or 3, we actually share some research about animals that are given stimulus and then no stimulus, and then their brains actually weigh 10% more in the stimulus environment. that literally have grown their brains and they're heavier. So try and get them to see this idea that neuroplasticity is a biochemical process. It's really growing your brain, and that hopefully can help inspire them to have a growth mindset, because there's actual brain research behind the outcome.
Yeah.
Do they go away if we don't use back?
There is a little bit of decay that happens. They can be less dense, but there's a framework for that pathway that you built on. So that 4-language example that Miguel gave about learning a language, being really proficient at it, and then forgetting it, you might be able, when you come back to it, pick up words or pick some things up easier because you've laid that pathway.
Does it depend on age?
Well, actually, the interesting thing is a lot of this research started.
Way to go, Jamie.
I was thinking
This is quick for us,
A lot of the research started with Alzheimer's, and so the idea that you can't learn when you're older, that's not true. Like neuroplasticity continues. Like the most intense neuroplasticity is the earliest part of your life. Like your brain growth is exponential in the beginning, but you're capable of neuroplasticity, and a lot of this research was to address Alzheimer's and other kinds of memory loss. So it's not the same, but you're capable of memory of brain growth.
Taking away our excuse.
Yes, that's what we're here for. We're excuse killers.
Have you heard it's a really very new study out of, I think, San Francisco State, but it might be UC San Francisco, on using a video game that they created called Neural Racer with elderly patients, and they are regaining amazing skills. Now, it hasn't been replicated a lot. It's brand new, but video games and the aging brain.
Yeah, Lumosity, that's the premise. That's actually by brain research. I know,
And
video games, but that's
so
set up on brain
that's
research.
part of the reason, the motivation, I think, of the research is, these people are getting money for all, is this really grounded in something, and it's really exciting.
Yeah.
I just want to, real quick, you know how we skim the op-ed pages of the paper? Years ago, I read Alzheimer's work. People who read books in their old age slowed Alzheimer's development. So I tell my 18-year-olds that. And now you don't have to worry about this, but if you keep reading books into your 80s and 90s, you will delay or avoid Alzheimer's. So it's the same kind of thing, right? Because you're still building your brain.
So they don't really have a cure for the plaque, but they're actually building new neural pathways to kind of circumvent the plaque area. So that's actually a lot of this research started was with elderly patients. Because I thought the same thing. That first 5, that idea there's this window, but they're actually discounting that there's a set window. There's privileged times.
Went to sleep. Okay. Just talked about that. So that was session 1, pretty much, that we did with students about mindset. We started out by talking about how the brain functions. We showed them a video about how dendrites grow in the brain. And then we did an activity where we simulated neuroplasticity. And after the first session, what we really wanted students to latch onto was that your brain is like a muscle, and that if you exercise and use it, it will grow. So the yellow handout that you guys have, which should be the next one, is an outline of all 6 of the sessions that we used. So the first one was the brain function, is what we focused on. We outlined this, the students got this at the end, I think, to just recap all of our sessions, but we reviewed the key terms and the concepts. We tried to give them some images from our presentations to help them remember, and we outlined the activity that we did. So we call that the cotton ball activity. In session 2, that's where Miguel was talking about the study with animals whose brains were heavier when they weighed them, for animals who had toys to play with and others to interact with. That was session 2, where we call it Using Intelligent Practice to Grow Your Brain. We read an article about that. And then in session 3, we look at a juggling experiment that was done in Germany of a group who were taught how to juggle and a group who weren't. And then they all got MRI scans and the impact on their brains, what areas grew in their brains. Yeah.
This is one of the good points to come back to the decay part.
Oh, yeah.
Even though they did it, no juggling measured the MRI of the brain. Juggling measured and saw, and you can see a little image, the highlighted yellow part in the image. That was parts that had developed and actually grown as a result of spatial planning. And then they came back 3 months later with no practice.
Right.
And they still had these more developed. They weren't not as big as they were before, but they still were there. So that was one of the research elements of decay happens, but not elimination.
And then the back of it is sessions 4, 5, and 6. In sessions 4, we talked about, the students, we talked to them about ways to remember things, how memory works. We do an activity there, a mind mapping activity. And then in session 5 is when we really introduce them to the language of growth mindset, and we look at different scenarios of how students react to things and what kind of mindset that reflects. And then in session 6, we use this as like a reflection activity where we ask students to kind of reflect upon ways that they are applying growth mindset in their lives. So then the next sheet, now we'll match up, I think, is an infographic about growth mindset. So in over 20 years of research, Carol Dweck and other researchers have identified 2 implicit theories, fixed and growth mindsets, that shape how people perceive themselves, set goals, and develop patterns of behavior. So people with a fixed mindset feel that intelligence is static. It doesn't, you can't get smarter, it's just you're smart as you're smart. And they see challenges, they respond to challenges and give up. They don't want to put any effort in. But people with a growth mindset see challenges as a learning opportunity to grow. We have a professor who says a setback is a setup for a comeback. And that's what the growth mindset is. So research is showing that mindset is malleable, and you can change someone from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. So we're going to do another activity that we did in session 3 that we're going to do right now. So you guys don't have these hands, we're going to pass them out.
All right, so this activity, like most of my best ideas, I stole. So what I'm going to ask you to do is not turn this over until I instruct you to do so, because I'm going to give you the instructions first, and this is in fact a timed event. So we're going to use this as a tool to measure who has a very important skill. This is a skill that's not just important in school, but actually sort of going to help you to be successful in life, or perhaps less successful in life. And some people may have this skill and some people don't, but we're going to find out who does. Again, it's really important. So I want to make sure you take the test seriously, because it will identify who has a crucial life skill and who doesn't. So I want to make sure you understand the instructions, so I'll just say them to you really simply. You're going to circle the numbers in ascending order. So not yet, but when I say, you're going to turn the paper over. And you're going to circle 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. If you can't find 6, you don't get to skip ahead until you find the next number. So you're circling in ascending order, no skipping. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, once again, I want to remind you, it's a really important test which will identify a certain life skill that some of you may have. Again, it's not just for school, it's really today's technological society. It's really vital that you have this. So if anyone has any other questions, you have a timer ready?
I do. Everyone has something to write.
Only have 30 seconds to demonstrate your skills, so please be ready. And
ready, set, go. Seconds left. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. Stop. I love hearing them different responses to stress.
Who got 27? Right? 27? 25? 22? 20? Anybody got 20? 15. A couple people have 15. That's good. It's excellent. I think that's really important that you did that well. It has a success factor related to the success on this test. Oh, well, that's excellent.
Oh, you're 18.
Wow. Did you do that?
No,
So, because it's so important, I want to give you one more try. And I'm going to give you some help before I ask you to do it again. But so you have one more try. So just to be clear, wherever you left off, you'll start. So if you were at 18, you would pick up at 19. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So you can continue. So I'm going to give you really good advice. Ready? Try harder.
Okay. Ready, set, go. Seconds. 5 5 seconds. Stop.
Okay. So now we're going to find out who did better. So it's pretty simple. You're going to take your final score and subtract your first score. So if you had 18 and then whatever your new score is, subtract that. And if that second number is bigger, then you did better. So we're going to find out who did better the second time. So ready? How many people did better the second time? See, I'm a great teacher.
Ah,
So
you
a lot of
guys
people
tried
did better. So I get good. How many people did worse? Now I feel like a bad teacher. How many people did exactly the same? Points for consistency. Okay, so if you didn't do better, why not? What are some reasons that maybe you didn't do better? There's lots of them. Yeah.
I was looking for 19, but I'd already circled it.
Okay.
She made a mistake.
Yeah.
I had already realized I wasn't gonna get it.
Okay, so you kind of decided this isn't for me. I'm not going to
No,
participate.
I didn't give up, but I already knew, well, I'm not gonna, at the first time, I'm like, I can do this. The second time, I was like,
All
I'm not
right.
gonna do it, but I'm not gonna
Was
do it.
anybody frustrated?
Yeah.
Like when I said try harder, like you weren't insulted, like when I wasn't trying before? I think a lot of I was.
Well, I think your tone should be, instead of try harder, you just need to try harder. And that'll.
That would have been, I missed that. And I'm not good at that one. I got to work on it.
We're gonna test here.
Then we will throw things at you.
Okay, good.
I was frustrated because I thought you were going to tell us a strategy,
Oh.
and instead you just said try harder.
Yeah. That is, yes, that's actually what I was going for. To frustrate you by saying try harder. So they, for me, I think that's what we do with a lot of students, right? We say to students, like, come to you, I'm having a hard time, and not you, but some teachers say things like, well, you should try harder. And I think that's really bad advice. If they were actually sincerely trying, doing more of what they were doing is a bad strategy. If it was going to work, it should have worked. We should get them to try smarter, right? And not harder.
But I do think, so, like, I'm really tired because I just taught back-to-back classes and I was a little bit lazy the first try.
Okay.
So when you said that,
I actually
She heard really good thing on
So what happens if you tried harder and did worse?
Well, I think
That's frustration.
yeah, and right now what else is there to do? I've already tried harder, there's nothing left. I think that's really good question.
So someone mentioned she wished that we had shared some strategies. So let's go around. Did anyone use a strategy when they were doing this? Yes.
2 hands.
Yeah, that's what I did the second.
Looking ahead and finding,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Similar?
To hold my finger and the 2 numbers or so,
Uh-huh.
so I know where to go.
Okay. Any other strategies? Okay. So we talked to students about how one of the things, we talked to them about a concept called intelligent practice, which is effort plus good strategies for help plus help from others. So we shared some strategies here. We're trying to get help from each other. And now we're going to share a strategy that we use.
So, like I said, I stole this. It was a workshop for students and or teachers, and there was about, I'm guessing, 80 teachers in the room. And I was sitting next to a person who really did get 27 the first time. And the person was really impressed, as I would be, because I've never seen anyone do that. Bless you. And she said, "Oh, you're a math teacher?" And she said, "No, she was an English teacher." And he was impressed again. And then he said, "Well, what did you do in that first break?" I think he thrown off his game, because I don't usually ask people who are doing well why, because I don't want you to get strategies, because I want you to be frustrated. But she said, "Oh, I noticed it went like this." And I thought that was great. I was sitting right next to her, right? So I did better because I was kind of picked up on that little cue. What shocked me was only about 10 people did better in a room of 80 people. Because most of them were so frustrated by it, he must have been more mean and stuff, because he made people really angry with the try harder thing. And they just shut down and didn't do it. But what I thought was fascinating for me, the takeaway was, in a room of teachers, when given a strategy from an expert, 27 and 30 seconds, they didn't listen to the strategy. They didn't take it and use it, which how much harder is it going to be for our students, who everything is new, as opposed to a room full of teachers who are supposed to be trained in that sort of thing. So I think we often give strategies, but we don't give them in a way that's noticeable to students, so they don't see it as a strategy. We don't. My advisor used to call it hiding the football. You ever watch football on TV and they do the fake handoff and the camera watches the guy and all of a sudden they realize, oh, the guy over here has the ball? I think we as teachers sometimes do that. We do something we think is helpful, but we did it in a way that didn't stand out and they watched the wrong thing, like we're magicians. So if you would take you want to explain that for me?
Sure, yeah. So take your blue sheets that you have. You can turn these over, you know what it looks like. And you're going to fold it in half, either hot dog or hamburger style, doesn't matter. So fold it in half.
The numbers inside.
And it actually won't matter either
It
way.
doesn't matter either way. Numbers are inside or outside. or outside. And you're gonna fold it again. You're basically making 4 quadrants.
I feel like the students when it's holding stuff and doing
Okay, so, and then you're gonna open it back up again. And your sheet should have 4 quadrants. So, number 1 is in this upper left quadrant. Number 2, right. It goes in clockwise manner. So,
Does everyone understand?
does everyone understand the pattern?
So we're going to give you one more try. Now we've actually given you some helpful other than just the encouragement to try harder. One more try.
Ready, set, go. Five seconds. Stop, time's up.
Oh,
How many people did better?
it's too loud. Oh, it's barking.
Now, I have to say something a little bit sad for you, which is this is a useless skill, and now that you're good at it, it doesn't help you at all. But you do get the sense of accomplishment of improvement. So you got that. But I like to set that intense, like try to make it really serious, because I think we do that to students too. We say, what we're doing is really important. You need this for whatever, for your life, for the next class. So we create high intensity, which just makes things harder, not necessarily easier. But so this skill isn't really helpful, even though you're all not really good at it. It's not
When we have a microphone, I try to lean in and really emphasize how many seconds you have left. If people get really upset with me, because we're trying to create this high pressure environment. But a computer program will know that computers do this much faster than we ever will. So it is a useless skill.
You said an English teacher did better than a math teacher. I happen to be a math teacher. But it seems to me being able to read and be able to see a wider area is a big help.
Yeah, I was impressed she picked up the pattern like so fast that she could do it 27. And so I don't know whether it's reading that did that. She actually, it's interesting you say that. She's actually the smartest English teacher I know because she became a reading teacher. So now she talks about books, but she doesn't grade papers. She's a genius.
Exactly.
Okay. So over the course of about 6 months, Miguel and I worked on an action research project to study how incorporating growth mindset strategies in developmental skills courses improves students' learning strategies and helps them respond to educational challenges. That's what we were focused on. Thanks. So at West, we basically, at both campuses, we selected faculty who are teaching below college level. So we have 3 faculty at West in math, English, and ESL. At my campus, Math 105 and English 21 are sometimes more than 2 levels. It's the floor, the floor of those basic skill sequences, 2 to 3 levels below, and ESL 8 is 1 level below college level English.
At Fullerton, I asked all 11 full-time faculty who were teaching 2 sections of our English 60 course, which is 1 level below college writing. 6 of them agreed with assignment. Actually, one of those people was reassigned to our 59 accelerated course, which is now 2 classes below, but they could skip all the way into English 100. So we end up with 5 who are teaching 60 and 1 who was teaching 2 sections of 59. I wanted 2 sections so we'd have a control group, so the same teacher doing everything else the same except these interventions, and we can compare the data. So that's how.
Stay on for a second. So we had 9 faculty. Of the 9 faculty, there was a range of teaching experience. The faculty had been teaching between 4 and 25 years. 7 of the 9 faculty had been teaching for at least a dozen years. And so we worked with these 9 faculty in these classes to present 6 20-minute interventions.
Do you know if the Math 105 was that basic skills was an arithmetic or an algebra?
It was, I think it was arithmetic. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to share some
Did you want to
findings.
talk about the different the 2 methods?
Oh, yeah, sorry. And so we had 2 different designs at the campuses. At my campus, I talked to the faculty and I went into their classes and presented the sessions. So I came in 6 times for 20 minutes and interrupted them and made the presentations. But at Miguel's campus,
So people still call her the brain lady.
yeah, I run into students sometimes like, oh, the brain lady.
At my campus, we had a faculty inquiry group, and I met with my faculty at the training, and they went in and did their own intervention in their classroom. I never went into any of their classrooms, so it was two different models.
But we use the same exact interventions and the same data collection methods. So we're going to share, I think Miguel's going to talk about the findings with the faculty.
I think they have that.
And I think you have this handout. Yeah, pink.
So I'm not going to go over the entire handout because there's a lot, but 100% of the faculty who participated, both with the Bring expert coming in as Mary Jo and my faculty inquiry group, 100% of them integrated growth mindset, and 78% use it in other courses. So they didn't just use it in beyond the 20-minute sessions, they use it in their other teaching. And 100% are going forward and using growth mindset. So it was influential to all the people who participated, and there's something they think is important and are going forward. In fact, my campus participants are working on developing a themed course for English 60 or the 59 Accelerated that just kind of uses growth mindset as integrated through the entire assignment process. So they were so committed, they set up their own second faculty inquiry group to develop a themed course. So they were highly committed to it, and I think you want to go with the chest.
Yeah. On the back of the pink handout are some of the qualitative responses we got. Before we started the interventions, I did pre-interviews with my faculty. Miguel did a focus group with his faculty. And we did that pre and post, and we coded some of their responses. So one of my favorite, at Miguel's campus, his campus had kind of already been introduced to mindset. Some of your faculty were already using Brainology in their classes. Mindset, my faculty were not very familiar with it. And so we had them, actually, we also had our faculty do the 3-question survey that the students did to see where they fit on the spectrum. We had our faculty do this as well. And kind of one of our questions was asking them about if they think intelligence is fixed or can grow. And one of my faculty members started out by saying, oh, I think you're as smart as you're going to get. And he started out and said, I think I can tell you which one he is. Under finding 2, applying growth mindset beyond the intervention course, he is the first one, yeah, West Faculty C. So in an interview, he was talking to me. When we first talked, he had said, I think intelligence is fixed. I think you're as smart as you're going to get, and that's just how you are. Then he sat in and observed the sessions, right, that I was presenting to his students, and I interviewed him at the end. And I really liked this response because he was one of my faculty who made a big switch. He had started talking about how he's a chess player, and before he had talked about how, well, you know, I'm an internationally ranked chess player, and I feel like in chess, you kind of play chess and you get ranked and you just plateau and it doesn't really change. So that's just the kind of chess player you are. At the end when I interviewed him, he had used that same chess example, but it said, well, you know, after listening to these sessions, I'm in a tournament now and I've actually started adopting new strategies. I've started reading on different ways to play, looking at new ways to approach the board, and I'm in a tournament and I'm 4-0. So we didn't know that he was just an observer. You know, he wasn't filling out data for us, but just an observer in the class. And he was talking about how the mindset he was taking it into his hobbies and his personal life. He was one of my favorite things. He was my math instructor. And then we're going to share now some student findings. So to give you some context, we started out with 9 classes. So we had about 200 students do the pre-intervention survey. We ended with 7. We had one class couldn't finish because of the timeline, and another class couldn't finish. I can't remember.
And there was another class where one data sample got misplaced somewhere between getting it to me and the teacher, so we couldn't use that class. We missed one piece.
So we ended with 7 complete sessions. So 150 students. But since it was so many students to look at every session they filled out a handout for our data collection, and it was so many that we randomly selected 5 from each class to map 35 students across all 6 interventions. So for our students, one of the findings that we looked at is transferability. This wasn't something we were thinking about, but we started seeing that students transferred growth mindset practices beyond that intervention course. In 60% of them, so that's, let's see, 21 out of 35. One of the sessions we asked them to describe at least one specific example of how they practice growth mindset, and if any of our discussions changed their view of mindset. So students gave answers related to using growth mindset in another class, outside of school, during hobbies or at work. When we weren't even prompting for that, we weren't even looking for it. It was very surprising to us. One student in the English class talked about using these types of strategies in her math class, going to a tutor. Another person talked about At work, they were able to learn to run a machine better that manufactured metal studs. He said the machine was very complicated, but with hard work and dedication, I managed to learn the machine and run it on my own. At our last session, we had 89% of the students respond to a question called, 89% of the students said they had used any of the strategies in their other classes or outside of class. When we saw the results from session 5, we then started asking, okay, are you using this outside of class? So since we were able to see the results, we could change our questions a little bit. So this transferability concept was something we weren't looking for, but was really powerful because it's 6 20-minute sessions, and it started impacting the students not only in that one intervention class, but in all their other academics and their non-academic life. So also I wanted to give you your salmon colored handout is a list of all of our research questions. The top table is our research questions related to students, measuring the effect on students and our findings, and the bottom table is measuring the effect on faculty. Yeah, and there's also qualitative sampling of some qualitative results on the back. Okay. So we also looked at student success data. So at West, I pulled out ESL 8. What we did was to analyze the course, this is course completion rates. We pulled data from fall 10 up until the intervention course. And I picked ESL 8 because it has a small n, so we hoped it would be more comparable to compare. But they historically have a high course completion rate. But in this intervention class, nobody got a W. Everybody completed. It was 100%. And actually at West, all 3 of my classes, 100% of students completed. Nobody got a W at the end. It was very remarkable. So that's on course completion. The next one is on course success data. For ESL 8 again, ESL has a pretty high success rate, but the intervention class was the highest in this one.
So
And at Fullerton,
at my campus, it wasn't quite as dramatic, but course completion was a range of the same semesters from 77 to a high of 83, and this intervention courses were 86. So better than the best of the last several semesters, and better, significantly better than some of the lower semesters. And we did not have 100%. So it's interesting that perhaps maybe the outside presenter model might have more influence on students, perhaps. It's too small to say, but definitely there was a stronger influence on the faculty with the faculty inquiry group, which that might also be valuable because you're not just getting the class you happen to go to, but all the future classes of the teacher. So I'm not really sure even if those are consistent results or if which one is a better option, but they did seem to have some differences between them.
That's a question. When you're referring to they've transferred some of the strategies that they learned, are those strategies outlined somewhere in here, or were they, do we know, have those specifically what those strategies are?
So probably when you look back, there was one of the first yellow pages that had all 6 sessions.
Oh, that so
yeah.
in this.
So things we didn't talk about, things like intelligent practice
Yeah.
would be a concept, or using a mind map. So sometimes they would specify which one, and sometimes it was self-reporting. So sometimes they would sort of generically mention, I use a growth mindset. But sometimes like some of the quotes we pulled out, we thought were very descriptive. So we didn't do it in a quantitative way, though in my dissertation, that's an aspect that I'm going to go back to. I'll have 270 students in the sample approximately, so it's a big enough group to do a quantitative study. But right now it's sort of qualitative, so there might be one great description that lists a bunch of things, and someone else might just say, yes, I used it in sports. So I don't have a better answer.
and then the other thing we looked at for students is resource use. I think we have that.
So we asked resource use in the pre-survey the very first time, then we asked in the mid-session 3, and then we asked again in the post-session. So we can talk about library first, because you probably noticed.
So in our design, when we asked them these options, we would refine the design next time, because at my campus, tutoring, the writing lab, and some instructors, office hours happen all in the library. So it wasn't clear cut. If they're going to the library to do these things, yeah, so
you didn't know.
we didn't know exactly. So that's why we think it spikes so much.
But if you look, basically every other category significantly increased as well. And one of the things I think is really promising is the increase in office hours. They went to office hours. And what's great about this combining them open-ended and closed questions is we have data that they went more often, but then they told us, I used to be scared to go get help, but now I know asking questions is part of being a good student. So they would tell us why they're doing it, because they were learning that it was actually a good strategy, it was appropriate, it was desirable, it was part of intelligent practice, getting help from others. So they're verbally explaining these results. So the dramatic increase was good because we said we want to know the outcomes of how they get better grades. We also want to know what behaviors they're doing differently to get there, right? So we were very pleased at the dramatic increase and the correlation between what they said and why they said they were doing it. So.
And I think in your new design for the dissertation, you're going to look at frequency.
And also how helpful things were. So if they went to something but didn't find it helpful, that would be useful to know. And also of the 6 sessions, we're asking them in this new design, like which elements of the session, because maybe we can get it down to 4 sessions. Maybe we get, like if there's only a few things that stand out to everybody, maybe we don't need 6 20-minute sessions. Maybe we only need a shorter version. So as we go forward, we're trying to refine the process.
How were the sessions spaced during the semester?
That's a
Well,
good question.
yeah, so ideally,
Yeah.
if you want to keep people in the class, you should start the first week of school, or at least the second week. But because our UCLA timeline and our campus timeline was dramatically different, they started about week 6
Yeah.
or so, and then we're approximately every 2 weeks. So
Yes.
that's when we said we lost one. It's because one teacher decided my students aren't ready for their final, and I can't take another 20 minutes. Like, so that's we lost a session. So now we do it the next rounds going forward, and there's a couple ways that's going to happen. We'll talk about that in a second. Ideally, their training happens for the faculty. They start week 1 or 2, and then it's approximately every 2 weeks or so in session. So, because I understand as a teacher, you don't give up so much time, even if it's valuable. It's still, still your class time. So that's the goal. But we weren't able to do it that way because we had to get approval from everything in our end before we could do anything at the campus site.
The process of students taking this and internalizing it, so it's not just intellectually understood, but they're actually doing these things. Do you find that takes a long time for them to develop, or do they, once they get it, they continuously get it, or is it the kind of thing
Well,
you have to keep working
Maybe
on?
we should let Angie.
Oh, yeah. Let's see if our case study answers your question. So, Ms. Angie, we have a ringer come through.
Nicely done,
We did plan to. Thank you for that cue. So, like I said, since we randomly selected 5 students, we were able to map them all throughout the 6 sessions. So we're going to present one student, Angie, our case study at Fullerton College.
Hi, I'm Angie and I'm 20 years old. I go to Fullerton College and I'm taking classes at other community colleges. This semester, I'm taking English 59 and one other class. I've been at FC for more than 2 years and I'm majoring in business management.
Hopefully you guys can hear that. Fullerton College, majoring in business.
How old did she say she was?
28.
That's what I thought.
And she's
been
in
there for-
English 59.
And she's been there for 2 years.
That's 3 semesters before, like 2 semesters till you get credit. And she's,
She also attended other schools.
Yeah,
before
she's a
she
floater.
said, yeah.
Yeah, she goes to other community college schools. Okay. So every session we had them fill out a handout to collect, that's how we collected our data. So we're gonna look at all of her responses. So this is during session 1, question 1.
oh, and so she's 25G. So G is a teacher class, and then that's number. So we didn't have any names. So we actually made up Angie. That's not really her
Yeah,
name. Just so you know, we don't know students' names. So.
But that information we got that is based off of her demographic information. So that's how we mapped it. We don't even know if actually it's a woman. I think we got.
Yeah, we had gender.
Yeah, we had gender. Okay.
The most interesting thing I learned during this
During the session was how information is passed and used in the brain. Because I didn't know that your brain grows every time you learn something new. We also asked her, one thing she would do differently after the session is to try to learn and ask questions as much as possible, because I want my brain to continue to grow.
So that was the end of 20 minutes. So starting to internalize and use the kind of language and things that we would hope after that.
I like the answer.
Oh, you like the one
Where
before
my
that?
actual
Oh,
answer
that is
versus-
really
Yeah.
common.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I was genuinely surprised how
Oh,
often
I
they,
wouldn't be, no,
not
I'm
just,
not
not just
surprised
Google,
at all.
but videos, how much they watch
Yeah.
videos
Yeah, oh, yeah.
to learn.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Going to like reading to postpone Alzheimer's, that's not going to be an issue for you. Unless videos help,
That's
that's
why
not
I'm not surprised to see that.
So then in session 3, we were frozen. It's not in this one.
It does. It's interesting about this stuff.
Okay, technical difficulties. Oh, it's totally frozen. we'll take questions right now too. Let me quiz.
So when you do follow-up research, are you going to track the students that you followed and see if they're transferring these skills, or is that part of your research? Or?
So that's a really good question. I'm going to answer it in a couple parts. So first of all, the students who participated, one of the things we asked them is, would you be willing to do follow-up interviews? And about 50 of them said yes and gave us contact information. So sometime when I'm not teaching and going to school full-time, I'll do that. Maybe in the summer I'll try and see if I can find some of them, etc. So that's one way we'll track that first wave of students. Then also, I'm doing my dissertation with this, with another group of about 10 faculty at 2 campuses. And so there won't be in the dissertation itself immediately follow-up, but I would anticipate doing follow-up after that. And third, the state 3CSN network, some of you may know, has put out a program for us to train faculty in Southern California this year, in the coming fall, and then they'll do this on their own campuses in different classes. And then we're doing again in the in next year in Northern California. And the 3CSN has a lot more resources than 2 of us do. So we're working with their researcher to start developing long-term tracking. So we're in the planning phase right now to develop the tools so we have all the information to do that well. So sort of several ways that's happening. One of them is really official, but it's going to take probably 2 years when we get that data. So did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thanks.
Still frozen.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So I haven't really read much of Carol Dweck's work. Would you recommend we start with the original Growth Mindset book, or the Growth Mindset for the Classroom book, or something else? Or and do you ever have students read her work?
So I personally have not. Many of my colleagues have. I don't think the popular book is really the best way to get at what she's doing. Maybe for students it's accessible. I think the Brainology article, and we use one that's sort of adapted, is good for students. It's 2 pages. It gets a lot of information in there. I think the book is not the best. I've done a lot of research. I read the book, and then after reading the book, I could see why some of my colleagues were less impressed with the book. I think popular writing about science is hard to do. So I'm not sure that I would assign the book. Other people have, and I think some students really like it and some don't. I think there's shorter things that would be easier to access.
Can you tell me about the website?
Yeah, there's the Brainology website, which has a lot of resources and specific things that are already out there and available, like designed for interaction with students. You can subscribe to one version of Brainology, and then they interact it right on campus. I think just a week ago, 2 weeks ago, there was a big Stanford study released about integrating Brainology into high schools. So that's what they've really been working on at Stanford with Carol Dweck and her colleagues. So.
And she has a website too, that you can just access lots of.
The most interesting thing I learned during this discussion was how information is passed and used by the brain. Because I didn't know that your brain grows every time you learn something new.
I'm just going to let her talk.
One thing I'll do differently after this discussion is try to learn and ask questions as much as possible. Because I want my brain to continue to grow.
Okay. Then in session 3, we asked them about thinking about intelligent practice. This is when we talked to them about the concept of intelligent practice, which is effort plus good strategies plus help from others. Please describe a specific example where you used intelligent practice since our last discussion.
I made an old Mexican dish. I tried twice to make it. I asked my mom for help, and the woman at the grocery store also helped.
So that was an example of transferability. We didn't expect her to, we thought she'd say, oh, I did it to study for this class, or to prepare for an exam or something. Okay, in session 5, we asked, when you face a challenge in school, how do you respond? And based on these learning discussions, how has your response changed? And if so, how? Or if not, why not?
I reread the text. I asked the teacher questions by sending an email. I email other students. Yes, because I understand getting assistance will help me understand the material better. In the past, I would reread the text and figure out the information on my own.
That rereading the text is also something that was really representative when we asked them how they prepare for to study for something. It's I read it over. I read my notes. I read my book. I just read and hope osmosis.
Back to harder and not smarter, right? Just do whatever I was doing before. Just do more of that same thing instead of like do something new.
And then second question.
In my history class, I've tried different ways of learning the material. By reading, looking at PowerPoint presentations, and videos to learn the material.
class, and this was an English class, so now she's transferred it to another subject.
And your question too about strategies, like we didn't ask them, we should read and tell, you should look at your notes or PowerPoint or online. We had them just tell us what strategies they're using. Okay, then in session 6, the very last session, this is a two-sided handout, we asked them about strategies they've used as a result of the learning sessions, what strategies that they're using to learn a new concept in school, and what additional strategies can you use to improve your learning in the future.
I've used these strategies in other classes since I learned this. I not only read the material, but I look online for videos that would help me understand the material. Since I can visualize the scenes from the video, it helps me memorize and comprehend the material. I also create an outline as I am reading the material, so I can stay on top of the key points. Then, I talk to someone else about the material, sort of teach them what I learned.
So that's Angie. We tried to pick a representative student who was pretty representative of the responses we were getting.
No, I think she did it, so that's how we would know what the detailed things is when they actually mention them. And so she's articulate and specific, so that's why she was helpful for us. And they weren't always that detailed.
Yeah. And we should say Jack earlier, his son was mentioned. Angie, the voiceover was his daughter. So we didn't know who Angie really was, so she helped us out in the project. So this actually was drawn on one of the student handouts during the final session. And we kind of captured it because we like to say, we didn't ask for it, we just had it on there, and we said, wow, we had a logo for what we were doing. This is it. Being smart is a choice.
Avoid drugs campaign.
Yeah.
In elementary school, you see what's down?
Yeah, it was just unsolicited.
Unsolicited.
Make that our logo, that's pretty good.
So so that's the summary of our findings. The purple handout that you guys have, just want to show you what this is. This was something we did in session 5 with them. This is when we gave them this infographic about fixed and growth. And we gave them some scenarios related to challenges, how you approach challenges, obstacles, effort, criticism, and success of others. And the activity here was we asked them to identify which one reflected the growth mindset. So we tried to do kind of scenarios that students had. And then you also have the answer key. That's the next one, though. So that was one of the activities we did in conjunction with recognizing growth mindset attitudes.
So one of the things we offer as when we do these, and we rarely have time, but we actually might, is the next handout is the growth mindset brainstorming session. So if you were interested, now while you want to use your time, so you could maybe spend a minute or two writing down some answers. Where's the,
No, it's all white.
yeah, it's white. How a growth mindset, the PEO, growing solution fixed education, of PEO powers, and then it says prompt and faculty response. So if you wouldn't mind taking a minute or two writing down what having a growth mindset means to you. Go ahead and jot down some notes in the space provided there, what having a growth mindset means to you. Finish that first one, maybe move on to the second and third. Let's do the top 3. So having a growth mindset will help my students. What do you think that means? Help them do what or how? And then third one, as a teacher, I can foster growth mindset in others by. So you just brainstorm for each of the first 3. I'm jealous because when I have my class be quiet, I don't get to hear seagulls and like sounds of the ocean outside the office. So you guys are very lucky. But why don't you turn to your table and just kind of talk about some of the things you wrote on those first three. We'll just do the first three for now. So.
Oh, yeah. The second one was success and motivation. To feel motivated.
For me, I just said I know I can figure it out if I keep trying.
Become better and more efficient learners.
I like the idea of what they're doing right now. So if you're right now, you're successful. You know, like as opposed to waiting for the future and it'll all work out.
I like started a
That's what
sentence
the growth mindset to me is doing something effective right now. Simple strategy. I don't think of a lot. I felt like asking. I like that idea of asking and trying to what's working, what's not working, what has some passion. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Yeah.
But when you get one of the situations I work a lot myself with other students. These are students who use the best at something, and that's the other biggest challenge. Students who are struggling with get to the part where they're challenged, they look around, they're stuck, they must be not smart, because smart has always been amazing.
Now, I'd be curious to see if the person you talked to
For a little bit,
So it's good to not be hide from those words, because they're not like, that person already has it in their head, like it's already, I am a smart person, so I can't do this, it undermines my whole sense of identity. So I think it's good, it's a very good mission. It's a conversation.
I think that's another idea, like a generative strategy, where it's like you give them a couple different things and say like, you try and make it to be as opposed to just like, here's this one thing, like do it this way, or like here's 4 or 5 things.
It's part of me, like, it's undermining my thing. I want to be able to say, I'm smarter than other people. And now you're saying that
and if you're not going to talk, so I really like it.
And not that she was struggling, it's like, I feel like teachers come down math, like, having to call. But she never, she liked math, so she could get smarter because I like math.
Yeah.
So it's like part of her.
And I kind of wondered how that factored into what they told the students, like, you know, okay, so growth mindset, so don't come to my office hours, or was it just like, it just happened? I was curious.
Was it really
Yeah, exactly.
Or what sort of subject that we were doing?
Yeah, they just decided, oh, I'm going to go to my teacher's office hours.
We were good students. I'm like, math, to learn what did I do to learn it? And I've had a lot of problems with my class to learn what I did.
I'd like to know what they do.
What's
It's not really sure when they said they transferred, I realized they were transferred. I guess just the idea.
But I
Sometimes within ourselves, so there's a so to transfer the knowledge outside of us. So then we then everybody learning more of that. And I'm just like, you know,
geographic knowledge, other stuff is kind of you might have had it visualized all along and never realized what it was or whether you had it. Now you
For example, you show it, model it all the time, that rather than like being isolated and not
about myself.
If you would hate and ask for help, it's like,
Like the running for me has always been fast. And I always say, I should have tried it. What?
oh, right, I guess so. Right.
I think too, it's so we all know these things, you know, but students don't, so it's like something that reinforce it. Because you went what you go through. Or I know with me, I don't always tell them these things.
I always tell everyone, and I tell myself, you have to like put in class every once in a while.
But even that basic instructor telling us
That's the part think about when you step to a meeting and you're not how does it feel?
But I think also people say, well, I'm just not good at that. You know, the commitment to I can't. So in some ways, having that civic mindset is you're not early on, and when you work,
Maybe I could give it
Yeah, that's true. It's not, that's,
when he was in I was sharing a lot more work.
Change. It's important, like, once you believe that, what do you do with that? So then you have strategies, you have like, techniques you can use. But you don't have to do it. Like, I would never go to the gym to get taller. So if I think of my intelligence as tricks like my height, there's no behavior I would make change. I get back at it, I can change my physical.
There's a whole thing, how much of their cognitive
I mean, I think just actually have to
language, but I think it's just like mental powers diminished.
So I think the really the point within the next step for me is like, again, what do I do with I hope for this. I know, but then I came to the realization that well, I was able to listen to a couple of conversations. So we have 2 more things I think we wanted to show you, so we're not going to finish, but I was impressed with the conversations I was able to hear. Just to point out, what we tried to do towards the bottom of the sheet, not that we're going to do it now, was actually talk about measurable things. I think it's valuable if you're going to do something as a teacher, you want to try something new, is think about how you're going to measure and assess. And I don't mean grade, I mean from your own point of view, what information are you going to get to figure out, did this work? Do my students perceive it as working? Do I perceive it as working? So I think that's just something to think about that I've been trying to do more as a teacher myself.
I had like math teacher jealousy is working on this because we're feeling like you can like really practice something and see that you got it. And like writing a paper, if they move from paper to paper, it seems like it's so much harder to get that. And like, do I need to have some worksheets where we just, like revise sentences and you get better at that? You know what I mean?
I would encourage student reflection. So, like, this is just my strategy. I don't actually give the student a grade. I give them a whole rubric. I type up individual comments, and they have to write saying, here's things I did well, here's things I didn't do well yet, and here are things I'm going to do to work on that things that I, like, and when they turn that in, then I give them a grade. So I want to separate the grade, because if you hand them paper like, oh, 83. 83 doesn't make you better or worse, it's useless, right? That's not a useful piece of information. So I try to get that reflective quality, and then I make comments back, like if they said they were going to work on these statements by doing X, I might say, well, what about this? Or, you know who else, someone else in class is also working on that, maybe you guys should work together. So I kind of have a dialogue with them on the reflective part of their learning. Because again, like you said, it's not yes, no, there's a lot of this amorphous area, gray area. Yeah.
Well, I have a different question, which is, I am a math teacher actually, and yes, some of the things are more measurable. So, students, do they ever raise concerns about, like, you know, yes, we can all learn, we can all progress, but the rates will be different even if we're putting the same effort in? How do you address that in class?
So a lot of students say things like, especially early on, like, well, I'm not going to be Einstein. Poor guy, always everyone thinks Einstein. I'm not going to be Einstein. I'm like, well, we're not saying that everyone has equal capacity, right? Just like if you say you can go out and try to get better at running, that doesn't make you an Olympic runner, but you can get better than what you are right now. And I think that's what we're saying to people is like, whatever this thing you're working on, you're not, what you are now is not what you could be. And you could, with the right strategy, with the right approach and the right help, get better than you are. Right? You might not become Michael Jordan or Einstein, but you can certainly improve. And I think that's what we're trying to say, is that you're not, whatever you define yourself as right now, that's only a choice. Because you can make a different choice and become a different kind of student in that subject or in that skill or that physical activity.
And you're not measuring your improvement against others, you're measuring your improvement against yourself.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I tried this on my daughter, who's, so she was like 10 at the time, and she's one of these, well, I'm not good at math, you know, therefore I will not try. Or whatever, I'm frustrated, I must stop. And I said, well, you know, I explained the whole theory to her, and that was her. She said, well, if everyone can grow and intelligence is a muscle, then why does Paul take high school math? Isn't there this genius kid in their class? And I just said, that's the outlier. We're talking about most people. Paul's over here, there's some other kid who's down here, but most people, we're talking about most people. So anyway, that's my
So this is where I get to share more about me. My name is Miguel Powers, and I used to say I'm not a math person. I know. So we had to take statistics, and I was like seriously anxious. Like I was really anxious about taking statistics. But I worked hard, I got help from other people, and I got the best grade on the midterm in the whole class, and I beat a physicist. So.
And to embrace intelligent practice, I found that out and said, oh, great, let's get a study group together for the final, and we totally did that. And I did very well in the class, too. It was
so,
very good.
I practiced growth mindset.
Yeah.
But you're the brain lady.
Not the statistician. Okay, two more activities. Really next, right, this guy.
Okay.
Should have pulled the image.
So this, wrong packet. You should have the next page is fairly long text. This actually is a different teacher, with an English teacher for English 60, who had them do a literary reflection at the end. So this was nothing to do with growth mindset, right? So this just, the student at the end of the semester, with all the things they've done, including the 6 20-minute sessions, was asked to reflect. So if you take a minute or two to read over this, and Mary Jo taught me this, if you could pull out golden lines.
Reading apprenticeship.
So looking for golden lines in this document, things that stand out for you, sentences or phrases that seem important or interesting to you.
Like if you were highlighting it, what would you be highlighting? see what golden lines you have, but before that, I just wanted to show you the image that we have up here. This is actually from a typography book. A person wrote a book of what it would look like to read if you had dyslexia. So we just pulled a page from it. Can you guys read it? The shape of the world as we know it has become unfamiliar. Word, sorry, yeah. See, I went to world, yeah, the shape of the word has become unfamiliar. So, okay, so let's see what golden lines, what parts stuck out to you guys. You want to share?
Taking my inner critic
To the curb.
I love that. I would kick my inner critic
Out of the room to the curb, right.
I like the first one. This has been a long one and not a good one.
Right?
Nice parallel.
After this last year, I would be free.
I would be free, right? I wanted to have an easy year to get to that free year. Yeah.
Just an overall thing is, it improved so much
Ah.
as we went down the page. I started circling stuff and then I underlined dyslexia. And I realized what I was looking at.
Yeah, yeah, we didn't make any corrections to reflect.
This is real?
This is real.
You didn't create this?
No, this is a real student.
And this wasn't our data collection. The
No.
teacher, Mrs. Page, just got this and said, I need to share this with
Yeah.
you guys because, like, again, it had nothing to do with our project. It was just a project she does in her class all the time. And this student wrote this as part, and you can see we took a little bit out because it's just already fairly long, but this is 100% what the student wrote, no corrections.
I particularly, this is just half a sentence, I would kick my inner critic out.
Yeah, out of the room, right.
I like the emphasis on taking critical feedback.
Taking
I think
feedback.
the student really internalized that part of learning, and it sounded like it was a new idea for them.
Right, yeah, and one of the fixed mindset is you don't take critical feedback, you ignore it, or it, self-deprecate yourself, right? Now, letting yourself free.
Yeah, I like this.
And looking back, I was also blamed for my poor literacy, and now I'm the only person who can, that can strengthen it.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's a pretty powerful statement.
Yeah, I like that part that says, but my disability is not all to blame.
Right, exactly.
Right. Taking ownership.
And I also like the sentence that says, or part of the sentence that says, simplicity did not help me.
Okay. Okay, great. So the last thing we have is we're going to show a short TED Talk by Angela Duckworth. You guys heard her research? Great. So this is her research she's done on grit. It's about 5 minutes. Hopefully it should be loud enough.
When I was 27 years old, I left a very demanding job in management consulting for a job that was even more demanding, teaching. I went to teach 7th graders math in the New York City public schools. And like any teacher, I did quizzes and tests, I gave out homework assignments. When the work came back, I calculated
every study, my question was, who is successful here and why? My research team and I went to West Point Military Academy. We tried to predict which cadets would stay in military training and which would drop out. We went to the National Spelling Bee and tried to predict which children would advance farthest in competition. We studied rookie teachers working in really tough neighborhoods, asking which teachers are still going to be here in teaching by the end of the school year. And of those, who will be the most effective at improving learning outcomes for their students? We partnered with private companies asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money. In all those very different contexts, one characteristic emerged as a significant predictor of success. And it wasn't social intelligence, it wasn't good looks, physical health, and it wasn't IQ. It was grit. Grit is passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. Grit is having stamina. Grit is sticking with your future, day in, day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years, and working really hard to make that future a reality. Grit is living life like it's a marathon, not a sprint. A few years ago, I started studying grit in the Chicago public schools. I asked thousands of high school juniors to take grit questionnaires, and then waited around more than a year to see who would graduate. Turns out that grittier kids were significantly more likely to graduate, even when I matched them on every characteristic I could measure. Things like family income, standardized achievement test scores, even how safe kids felt when they were at school. So it's not just at West Point or the National Spelling Bee that grit matters, it's also in school, especially for kids at risk for dropping out. To me, the most shocking thing about grit is how little we know, how little science knows about building it. Every day, parents and teachers ask me, how do I build grit in kids? What do I do to teach kids a solid work ethic? How do I keep them motivated for the long run? The honest answer is, I don't know. What I do know is that talent doesn't make you gritty. Our data show very clearly that there are many talented individuals who simply do not follow through on their commitments. In fact, in our data, grit is usually unrelated or even inversely related to measures of talent. So far, the best idea I've heard about building grit in kids is something called growth mindset. This is an idea developed at Stanford University by Carol Dweck, and it is the belief that the ability to learn is not fixed, that it can change with your effort. Dr. Dweck has shown that when kids read and learn about the brain and how it changes and grows in response to challenge, they're much more likely to persevere when they fail, because they don't believe that failure is a permanent condition. So growth mindset is a great idea for building grit, but we need more. And that's where I'm going to end my remarks, because that's where we are. That's the work that stands before us. We need to take our best ideas, our strongest intuitions, and we need to test them. We need to measure whether we've been successful, and we have to be willing to fail, to be wrong, to start over again with lessons learned. In other words, we need to be gritty about getting our kids grittier. Thank you.
So I have a colleague at my campus who shows this to her students, basic skills English class, at the very beginning of the semester, and talks to them about grit. And so throughout the semester, when they come to her and say they've got a problem or they've missed a deadline or something, she asks them, okay, well, what would a gritty student do? And she goes back to this, and so helps them try to figure out ways to respond and come back from what obstacle they faced. Maybe I'd like to wrap up with it because it kind of connects grit and mindset all together. So, there's a quote from one of your faculty members. But that's our presentation. Are there any other questions? This is also our contact information.
So what was the name of that lady?
Angela Duckworth. Buckwort.
Yeah, I was actually curious if you did and study motivation at all related to, like, measure motivation at all.
We did not.
Yeah.
That would be a good thing to do.
But we want to graduate. They tell us a done dissertation, no, a good dissertation is a done dissertation. Yeah.
But
Not yet.
But that would be the kind of thing that as we're bringing in the resources of the 3CSN network, where they have a staff of research.
And an evaluative team.
That's the kind of thing that we definitely will try and incorporate. I think that's a really good suggestion.
Adam, you know the passion project we brought to our attention first? I think it was first you that brought it,
Yeah,
that video.
Yeah.
I've actually used that with students. It's the subject of one of our papers on passion, persistence, and engagement. The students are writing about it as motivation, that the passion is the motivation. And what they're writing about is really interesting. Motivation's almost that word, which is so hard to define. It's kind of disappeared, and they're writing about it as the passion was the driving thing, and then came the persistence and the engagement and all this other stuff. So you're the one, remember that video?
Yeah.
My students loved that video. It was Chabot College, right?
Yeah. Good student.
Is the curriculum available?
Well, we're working on that.
Yeah.
Right? So we had the people apply to do the community practice with 3CSN, and so we might be able to share it out outside of that, but right now we haven't decided how to kind of do that.
But your college did submit an application, so I think some people will be trained, and we hope it'll be a train-the-trainer type model, so it'll probably get to you guys.
So yes, but we don't know exactly.
Yeah, yes, but we don't know yet how, but yes.
I'll ask another question. Mind mapping. I was just wondering if you could talk about that for a second.
Yeah,
How
so
you do that.
It's a really interesting technique that I picked up at a brain research conference. It's a great brain conference, Brain Education in Boston. I'll think of the name will come to me, the specific name, but it's in Boston. It's Harvard, MIT's co-sponsored. They actually have some in San Francisco too, but my campus won't pay for the one in Boston. I don't know. It's rather flying across the country. So anyway, this professor was doing a mind map, and so you create a visual representation of any concept, and then you manipulate it. Yeah, she might be able to pull up the video that we have. So he used photosynthesis, his biology teacher, and he taught a traditional lecture method to one group of students and mind mapping to the other. And they both did approximately A- work on their test. He didn't tell them. 60 days later, he went back and retested them. The mind mapping group had a B+ average, and the lecture group had a C- average. So they retained the information. They didn't know they were going to be tested. Just like on the spot, like, do you remember this concept? The mind mapping group dramatically outperformed them. So this was one of the sessions. So,
How many days later was it?
60 days.
So mind mapping, so basically it's like a puzzle you're creating. This is a different study. Same one, okay. So 12th grade bio students.
I overestimated the lecture. They only got 60%.
Yeah.
I remember
73
60%.
days later, 60% remembered just by lecture alone, and 92% remembered through the mind mapping technique.
The concept map? It's the concept map, right?
It's kind of like a concept map, but the students build it.
Yeah, of
themselves.
course.
Yeah.
So when,
Exactly.
So when you do it, do you have them do a mind map of something
Yeah.
related
So
to?
she's got a video. I think.
Yeah.
So,
So we do this.
We're going to do a mind map to learn about how to make memory and mind mapping. And this, you always start with a goal, something you're trying to learn. That can be procedural, be content information. And then you need to have motivation and attention. And so you have this motivation, and then you allows you to pay attention. And that enables you to do an action. So your motivation and attention allows you to do an action. In this case, we're physically manipulating the papers, and that's our action. By doing an action, you create a personal memory. And personal memories are often the most easily retrievable, which is the goal. So then we need to make sure we focus on elaboration, and this is one of the most important parts because when you give elaboration or explanation, you verbally connect the pieces. For example, explaining that motivation and attention are necessary in order for you to do an action. And then in elaboration, you develop an explanation verbally, which creates a neural pathway. After that, you need several times correctly, I should go at least 5 more times. That'll move us from mastery to automaticity. Automaticity is the process of learning something so that you can recall it without deliberate effort. For example, when you learn your times tables, you develop automaticity. So that would be, I'd be able to explain over and over that motivation and attention go together by being motivated and paying attention. I'm able to perform action, which creates a personal memory. And then elaborating and explaining that to someone else helps me create a neural pathway in multiple ways. And then I review that past mastery to automaticity, which enables me to achieve my goal. In this case, having a mind map that teaches me the process of how we create retrievable memories, which is the goal of creating retrievable memories that we can use later. And that's how the mind map works. Then you would take this and mix it up, pass it to the next person, and the next person would repeat the process by starting with goals, and then go through and explain the mind map to their partner. And that's how you use the mind map to learn and create a retrievable memory.
So this was the activity that we did in session 4. And so we have them watch the video. So it's a mind map of making a mind map. It's very meta. And we give them the pieces and we have them construct the mind map and explain it to a partner. And then they have to explain it to each other. So they can understand the idea that, and you have a really good example of that.
Yeah, so I taught this, in the introduction I mentioned that I mentor and train facilitators who teach in all different subjects, including math, and I taught them this idea, and then so now you guys make, so I brought paper and scissors, and the student made one really quickly that was for teaching how to multiply or divide fractions. And so he just made it up, cut up, and then showed how you flipped them and just taught the method really quickly. So students were able just to take the idea, come up with a new concept, and then make it up really quickly, and then it was able to teach other students. And then he used that to train the students. We made a video of it, and then now students have access to that example all the time. But so the key features are that you want to use different colors, different shapes, different fonts, because you're creating as many ways to create memories as possible. So by having, and if you can just do distinctive things. When I teach paragraph development, I have the thesis and the explanation part of the same color to show that they're going back to explain how it goes back to the thesis. So you can build in elements, or the shape might be significant to something like photosynthesis. You might use the sun if we're representing the sun's photolight. Right? So you can build them in any subject, but they should be distinctive and useful and purposeful in how you construct them.
Wow. That was blowing me away.
Snippet of 4.